All right, we're moving into the Progressive Era now. This is the era that comes after the Gilded Age, and it's called the Progressive Era because we're supposedly making progress and we're trying to fix the problems that were created during the Gilded Age, the problems that were bubbling to the surface. The progressives are trying to solve those problems. All right, so the progressive movement, this movement happened between 1900 and World War I. So World War I officially starts in 1914, so that era is known as the Progressive Era. It's the era we're going to be talking about for a few days. And the goal is to make progress. So to make progress and try to fix some of the problems that were built up during the Gilded Age. So America industrialized, big business is running rampant, people are being exploited and taken advantage of, and the progressives are a group of people that want to fix the problem. And they're mainly middle-class people. They're not the wealthy, they're not the poor. They're the ones that are educated enough to understand what's going on and try to fix the problems. And their goal is to, like I said, correct the political problems, the economic problems that were created by industrialization. And they mainly wanted the government to be the one, to be the thing that they use to fix those problems. So the government getting more involved, creating laws, and the government stepping in and fixing problems. That's the progressive movement. Some of the progressives felt the need to fix the problems in society based on their moral beliefs, their religious values. And this leads to a movement called the social gospel movement. And basically this was created by Protestant ministers, and they came out and called for social reforms, like we need to end child labor. We need to make safer working conditions for the people that work in our society. And it's our job as Christians, it's our duty to help those who are less fortunate and can't help themselves. And it would be sinful for us, it would be bad for us if we were not trying to reduce human suffering and make people's lives better. And so this group, they fought for those rights of those who couldn't fight for themselves based on their religious beliefs. And they also supported other movements like the temperance movement, which is trying to ban alcoholic beverages. Another thing the progressives tried to do during this era is to reform government. So try to fix the problems that government was having. And so before any reforms were made, we had something in government called the spoils system. And this meant that political leaders, when they were elected into office, for example, the President of the United States, when he's elected, he gets to give away government jobs to whoever he wants to. And so they would oftentimes give positions to people who supported them. So you gave me money, you helped me out, you did whatever, so I'm going to give you a job in the government. Now, what this leads to is people get these government jobs and they are oftentimes they're unqualified and they don't make good government officials. But you know what? The president gets to choose who he wants to put in. So unqualified individuals get put in. And so one of the things the progressive wanted to do is fix this problem of unqualified people working in government and just getting a job just because they supported the candidate. And so this leads to civil service reform. It's changing the way the government gives away positions. And so they wanted only people that were qualified to get the government jobs. And so an act was passed by Congress, the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act in 1883. And what this said is that government jobs should be given away based on merit and not the spoils system. So people would have to take exams and they would have to prove that they were going to be good at governing before they could get a government job. So this is how progressives started reforming government. Another political reform that was made in the progressive era is something called the initiative. This gives citizens the power to bring up a vote on a particular issue or a law that they want enacted. And so the citizens, if they want something done, they can write up a law, they can draft up a law or ordinance or whatever. They have to pass that around to other citizens and get signatures. So basically they have to get a petition signed. And depending on what state you're in or where you are, it's anywhere between 3 to 15% of the voting population have to sign this petition. And once you have enough signatures, then the vote is put on a ballot and put into a general election, and people vote on it. And if it's passed, then it goes into law. If more than half the people agree on it, it goes into law. And an initiative that's put into law cannot be vetoed by the governor or whoever, okay? If it's created and voted on by the people, the government can't veto it. All right, a referendum is similar to an initiative, but it's another political reform. But the referendum is basically where once the legislature passes a law, citizens can sign a petition to put that law onto a ballot in order to vote it down. So if the citizens don't like it, then they can put it on a ballot to vote it down. Or the legislature will sometimes decide that, hey, this is an idea we're kicking around. It's a law we created. We're going to pass it down to the citizens, let them vote on it, let them decide. And so you'll see either one of these, but this is what a referendum is. A recall is another political reform that was created in the Progressive Era, but the recall is basically where voters can remove an elected official. So it's an official that's already been voted into office before their term is ended, but people don't like what they're doing. They want to kick them out. And so a recall is the same thing. So you get a petition signed by a certain amount of people, depending on where you are, and then it goes to the general election, to a special called election, and people vote, kick them out of office, or let them stay in office. And the people can decide to pull someone out of office before their time is over if they don't like what they're doing. That is a recall. They're recalling them back out of office. Another reform that was passed during the Progressive Era is the 17th Amendment. So this is an amendment to the Constitution. So this basically gives Americans the power to elect their senators by ballot, directly electing them. So you go down during the election and you actually vote on who your senator is going to be. Before the 17th Amendment, U.S. senators were elected by the state legislature. So in Texas, we would vote on people to go to Austin and represent us in our state. And then those state representatives would decide who was going to be the Senate member that's going to go to Washington, D.C. and represent Texas. Reformers thought this was important because it put more power back in the hands of the people. Okay, and so this was passed by Congress in 1913 and ratified by the state. So instead of having the state legislatures choose the Congress, the people get to directly elect them. That's the 17th Amendment. All right, next we have muckrakers. Muckrakers, these are journalists that are trying to look for problems in society and bring them to light. They're trying to rake up muck. They're trying to figure out what's going on and what they can write about that's going to expose problems that's going on so they can hopefully get them fixed. So during this time period, cities are growing, and so are newspapers and magazines. And so reporters are able to get the word out to people because they're reading newspapers, they're reading magazines, and they're able to uncover corruption that's going on in society. And muckrakers help get a lot of stuff done that probably wouldn't have gotten done if not for their journalism. One thing being Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, led to reforms in the meatpacking industry and the way that we inspect meats and the way that food is handled and processed. And there's many other ways that muckrakers helped out American society. Speaking of Upton Sinclair, he was one of our famous muckrakers. He wrote the book The Jungle, and he described the meatpacking industry. And so basically when people read this book, they were outraged at what the meatpacking industry was doing, about the unsafe, unsanitary conditions. And so Congress responded, and Congress passed in 1906 the Pure Food and Drug Act and also the Meat Inspection Act to make sure that food was processed safely, that food and drugs were safe for consumers. So Upton Sinclair had a big impact on our food processing system here in the United States. He was a muckraker. Another important reformer is Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells was a writer, and she researched and wrote about lynching in the United States. Now, lynching is when a mob or a group of people decides that they're going to take the law into their own hands and they're going to execute somebody. And there's a lot of lynchings going on in the South. People were lynching African Americans a lot, and she exposed this lynching of many African Americans in the South as a way to control African Americans through fear. So a lot of times they didn't do anything wrong, but they would be lynched, and so this would strike fear into many African Americans, and they would be afraid to step out and speak out in society. So it was a way of keeping them down. And Ida B. Wells exposed that and wrote about that in some of her books. She also fought for women's rights and fought for women's suffrage. So obviously, being a woman, that was near and dear to her, and she fought for that as well, along with fighting against lynching. Jane Addams is our next important reformer. She was a progressive reformer that fought for immigrants, fought for the poor, helped those who were less fortunate. One of the ways that she did that was by founding Hull House, which is a settlement house. This is a place where immigrants could go, or the poor could go, to get job skills, to maybe get a place to stay for a little while, or to get help doing what they need to do, food, etc., help them get on their feet. So she founded that. She ran that in Chicago, Hull House, and she also fought for women's suffrage, fought for women's voting rights, because she felt like women should have a vote in trying to fix the problems, because women were affected by the problems in the early 1900s in the United States. She also, for her efforts, was the first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize, so important for that reason. And through her work of helping immigrants and the poor and creating the settlement houses, she's actually recognized as creating the social work profession, because that's essentially what she did before this was even ever a thing. So she was a social worker before there was social work, so she's kind of the mother of social work. Our last progressive reformer we're going to talk about is W.E.B. Du Bois. He is an important reformer during this time period. He co-founded the NAACP. He fought for African American civil rights, and he felt like African Americans needed civil rights immediately. They didn't need to wait for them. The law, the amendments that were passed, 13th, 14th, and 15th, granted them rights, and he felt like African Americans deserved them now. And so he was kind of opposed with another African American leader at the time, Booker T. Washington, who felt like that African Americans should accept where they were right then and work hard to move forward. So work hard, get an education, get a job, make strides economically, and through time, equal rights will come. That was Booker T. Washington. W.E.B. Du Bois felt like African Americans needed rights now, like yesterday. So obviously he fought against segregation and racism and discrimination because he felt like African Americans deserved equal rights right now. And so he worked his whole life for that, and the year after he died in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was actually passed into law by Lyndon B. Johnson, which we're going to talk about later on in this course.